trial that has been months in the making is finally underway. Opening statements in the third trial of A.J. Armstrong have wrapped up.
And we are learning some new details about DNA evidence in the capital murder case that KPRC2 Investigates was the first to let you know about. Now, this is the second retrial for Armstrong. His parents, Antonio and Dawn Armstrong, were shot and killed in their Southwest Houston home back in 2016. Both of his previous trials ended in hung juries. Armstrong continues to maintain his innocence. Over the coming weeks, we are bringing you innovative new options for keeping up with this case. It is called The Bench. So let's meet our team of experts.
Joel, Letitia, Rilwan, let's get right to it, guys. We've been waiting for the action that we saw today, and it finally got here. I thought opening statements were interesting. Just to bring you up to speed, we already told you, but this is the third murder trial for A.J. Armstrong, 16 years old when his parents were murdered back in 2016. He's now a father himself in 2023 and standing trial for the third time. I thought the prosecution came out firing with all guns today. I thought that John Jordan, the lead prosecutor, was right on target. Really, he told a story that made sense right off the bat and threaded us through about 45 minutes of where he's going to walk us through this trial in terms of evidence. What do you guys think?
Well, John Jordan certainly did not disappoint. He brought the thunder this morning, and he told his story. And I thought what was most compelling, because one of the biggest issues that the state has is, why would this kid kill his parents, right? It can't be because he got caught lying. Otherwise, we'd all be dead if you're a parent of a 16-year-old. But what he left the jury with was, he said, you may not know why he did it, but you'll know that he did do it. I thought that was powerful.
And what's different between this trial and the last two trials is that John Jordan started it himself. The last few times it was Ryan Trask, the other ADA, sitting at here. And you said that was important, that you noted that kind of starting with the heat, as you would say, just starting heavy, just letting it go throughout.
I mean, John Jordan is known as the premier trial attorney in the Harris County District Attorney's Office and has been known to be so for years. So I think they switched that up, and they came with their biggest, weapon initially in order to resonate and leave something with the jury.
Over the last few weeks for KPRC2+, we've been doing it on YouTube, we've been doing it on air, we've been putting together a series of videos, sort of primers on what you can expect during a trial, understanding some of the important terms. And we think this one is particularly relevant today. It's something we've put together on opening statements. Let's give a listen. Hello and welcome. We are decoding legalese with KPRC2 Investigates. These anatomy of a trial videos we're putting together are specifically designed to help you understand the complicated legal jargon you sometimes hear in a court case. After you watch these videos, you'll have a better understanding of those phrases. I have a question for you. What do you think makes a good opening statement?
I think that you need to have a narrative. I don't want to say story. Story sounds like something we tell our moms after we got jammed up for taking too many cookies. You have to have a theme, a narrative. It's got to be something where the jury can understand it, and it's got to be something that resonates. You need to be able to say that I expect the evidence to show. And that's the other thing. And you kind of need to preface it by saying, I anticipate the evidence will show, because that's all that you can talk about. It's opening statement. It's not final argument.
So is there a legal term you don't quite understand? No problem, we're on it. Just leave that word or phrase below in the comments section. And thanks for watching. Real quickly, Rilwan, let's talk about the defense's opening statement. What was sort of your view of that whole thing?
The defense opening statement was similar to the last trial, where they were kind of showing what HPD didn't do. They were saying HPD didn't fully investigate. They said this was interesting to me. HPD didn't interview neighbors next door, didn't ask for cameras of anyone in the area to see if they had any ring surveillance video that could have corroborated any of this stuff. So that's what really got my attention when they said none of the neighbors were interviewed.
And along those same lines, I thought it was interesting. He kept pushing this, that within the first 11 minutes, HPD had made up their mind when they arrived on the scene.
That was huge for the defense. The same way that the state brought it, so did the defense. And the defense brought it in planting reasonable doubt as we go through the trial.
We have so much more to talk about. We're going to wrap it up here on TV, but we're going to continue this conversation, including very important DNA evidence talk today in court. That's going to continue right now on KPRC 2+. But for now, on TV, let's send it back to you guys in the studio.
Keep going.
Okay, let's, did we say everything we wanted to say? We're on KPRC 2+ now. Of course, we're talking about the A.J. Armstrong trial, his third trial. He was in court today, wearing sort of a darker suit, gray, blue. He looked put together. We're going to talk about, you can bring that up here, Jason. Thanks very much. I just want to make sure we kind of have a continuous flow of ideas and we kind of keep it in line. Did we talk about everything we wanted to talk about in terms of how Rick DeToto and the defense attacked the opening statements?
Well, no, I think it was important to kind of elaborate on that a little bit in terms of the key points that the defense hit in order to kind of dismantle the state's opening statement. Because after the state finished their opening statement, you're like, if I'm a juror, I'm like, okay, defense, what do you have to say about that? What are you going to bring us? And so then I think that Rick was really smart in that what he didn't so much tell a story as he planted nuggets. He just kind of dropped a nugget here and a nugget there for the jury to hold on to in order to create reasonable doubt. You remember when we talked this morning, I said it's not the defense's job to prove anything. You don't have to prove the defendant innocent. Right. All you have to do is plant reasonable doubt. Yeah. And I think that that's what Rick's goal was in his opening statement, was laying out reasonable doubt. Number one, they didn't investigate anyone else. Within 11 minutes, they talked about some lieutenant or some sergeant or detective said, this is our guy. I'm not going to have an open mind. There's nothing else that you can tell me. This is our guy. That's huge because what that does is it could hinder the prosecution or the investigation, I should say. Yeah. It could hinder the investigation into the case, which Rick hit on. They did not look at any surveillance cameras in the area. They did not talk to any neighbors. They only talked to Josh, the brother, for 4 minutes.
4 minutes. I remember that because 4 minutes, and this is somebody that the defense is essentially proposing as an alternate suspect.
Right, exactly. And then I think he ended everything with what we've been saying the whole time. If you remember, he actually got objected to a number of times.
34 times.
It was how many?
34 times.
34 times.
And within the first 4 minutes, I believe it was objection 6 times.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it's slightly, I don't want to use the wrong words, but it's somewhat uncouth to object during the opening statement, isn't it?
That's a great characterization. It's uncouth because that's really how we look at it. We're taught you don't object during opening statements unless it's something really damning. Or if you need to call a timeout, right? Like you do in basketball. If the team is on a run, you call a timeout to slow them down. You don't really object. So to get objected to 34 times is in fact uncouth. Joel, that's a great way.
Who does that play against? Does that work against one side or the other? I mean, what is the jury thinking when they're hearing that many objections?
It could actually go either way. One of the things that I do during voir dire is I always ask the jury, if your life was on the line, would you want to go to war with a lion or a kitten? I always ask them that. And every juror always said, well, if I'm going to war for my life, give me a lion. I don't want to go to war with a kitten. For sure. And so what I tell them is, then please excuse me if I object, because it's my job to protect the defendant's rights. And so when I object so many times, they'll remember she's just being a lion. But sometimes that can play against you, because then it makes it appear like, well, what is it that you're trying to hide? Why are you objecting so much? What are you afraid of? And so it just depends on the juror in terms of how you look at that.
I thought it was quite noticeable, to say the very least, that he objected so many times.
It came to the point I was kind of waiting for an objection for whatever reason. I was looking, okay, but it was.
Well, and one of the times he didn't even give a legal objection. You can't object just to object. You have to have a legal objection. I think
Do you
one
have to
of the
state
times,
why you're objecting every time you object?
You have to give a legal objection. You have to objection, relevance, objection, leading, or something of the sort. Well, one time I think John Jordan just objected and said, Your Honor, that's not true. Well, that's not a legal objection. So that's basically just saying, I don't like what you're saying.
Right.
But, you know, opening statements is just for each side to lay out what they believe the facts will show.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that Rick ended the opening statements well because he talked about that DNA, that blood.
And that's a perfect segue. Let's us talk about that DNA, because we're the ones who sort of broke this news several weeks ago, that there was some amount of DNA, blood on, what was it, a name tag that was attached? It was an HPD name tag that was attached to AJ's shirt, which is, and we have a QR code, by the way, so you can learn more about DNA evidence and a whole lot of other stuff regarding trials and special words and stuff you just don't hear every day. That's a sidebar. But regarding the DNA, kind of walk us through where we came and where we're going with that. We came from several weeks ago. It just popped up right before the trial was supposed to start.
And we got more confirmation on that. Again, KPRC 2 Investigates, the first with this report, confirmation today that days before opening statement were set to happen, that prosecutors had what they are saying are renowned blood spatter experts on their team wanting to look at the evidence for themselves. So they go to the crime lab. Again, this is either Thursday or Friday.
Crime lab or evidence room?
Crime lab. I heard them say.
Was it crime lab? Okay.
I thought it was the property room.
Property room.
Property room.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you. This is why we have multiple people.
Good. We got the answer.
In the courtroom for you. So the property room, they go to check it out themselves. They claim when they looked at the shirts that AJ was wearing the day he was interviewed by detectives, and they peeled back that sticker, they saw two dots that they say was clear as day, essentially. Later tested out to be DNA of Antonio Armstrong Sr.
Blood, right?
Yeah, blood. And then defense comes back and says, wait a minute. And it was interesting when DeToto did it, he was trying.
Because this is suddenly appearing after 7 years.
Yeah, and that's what DeToto argues. There's a quote, he says, for 7 years, we now have new evidence. Something to that effect. He said it multiple times. 7 years, we now have this new evidence. And so during their opening statement, they kind of attacked back on that, pushed back, I should say, saying, bringing up the second trial, 2019, or excuse me, the first trial, 2019, different prosecutors might have contaminated the case, the evidence there, because they used their hands to show the pillows and the t-shirt. So that was brought in, that it might have been contaminated in that part.
DeToto, though, doesn't seem that scared of this evidence.
He doesn't, and it makes you wonder, what does he have up his sleeve for it? But if you think about the way DeToto laid it out, right? If you're paying attention, he says, okay, we have this renowned premier person who is published, who does crime scene reconstruction. And remember, the state says not only in the state, but in the country and worldwide. I mean, she's well known. DeToto comes back and says, well, you have this premier person. And what they're going to tell you is that when they uncovered all the evidence in the clothes, they did so in the property room. It was not in a sterile environment, which is required. They did not have on gloves, which should be required and is required when you're doing that type of testing.
And he said there was commingling of the different articles of clothing.
That is a cardinal sin when you're looking for forensic evidence. And the reason being is because of trace DNA. Trace DNA is simply, I'm sweating out here, right? Even though I have this little hefty fan. But if I touch you and you touch me, your DNA is on my skin. And my DNA is now probably on your skin. It's that simple. That's why things should not touch. That's why it's important to keep them separate. And remember, Rick said this is all on video in the way that they handled this evidence.
And he said, furthermore, he said, and if they don't introduce that video, I will.
Yes, he did. And so he basically warned them, don't play games. I suggest you put that video in, because if you don't, then I will. Then he went further to talk about another expert that's going to come in from Harris County Forensic Evidence, who's going to talk to us about cross-contamination and how easy that is. And so I think that it's going to be important, or at least very interesting, to hear how this evidence unfolds.
It's pretty interesting. Let me just ask a layman's question. So I'm thinking about this, as a normal person. I'm not an attorney, but I've sat through some trials. But I'm trying to think why it would be damning to have 2 specks of blood on the underside of an HPD name tag you're issued. He's in handcuffs.
Sure.
He's not touching that name tag that's going on him. They're slapping that onto him. And furthermore, they're saying that there's no blood on the shirt itself. So, I mean, it could have been a cop who was at the crime scene who could have transferred that.
It could have been, or it could have fallen from his face. It could have fallen from something else that was on him. Remember what I just stated, trace evidence is very easy to transfer. And so the same way that it can work for the defense, that it can easily happen, I'm sure that the state is hoping that they could paint this picture that somehow it fell off of Antonio somewhere.
We've got producer Jason directing our extra cameras.
AJ's leaving out over here.
AJ's just leaving now. Yeah, so it's 6:18, so they've obviously broken for the day. We understand that AJ and I imagine the family is going to leave for today. They've got to be back bright and early because Judge Kelly Johnson is not messing around.
No.
That was like a 28-minute lunch break, first of all. She told us to be back at 1:50, dismissed at like 1:21. But beyond that, she said she wants to get going 8:30 every morning, right?
Yes.
And wrap at 6. That's a good long day.
If not longer, she said. If they're in the middle of a witness that they could potentially finish for the day, she said they will finish that witness.
Okay, good.
I want to quickly mention, we talked about the blood possibly transferring anyhow. Before I left the court preparing for here, on the bench was Lieutenant Horlick, who was in charge of the group the night of the incident. He's the second one there on our screen on the drawing sketchboard that we have there. So DeToto was asking, well, and they showed a picture of AJ the night of as well, and they said, well, did you see blood on him at all? It's like, no. Is there blood on his shirt? No. Is there blood on his face? No. And so that they were trying to obviously get at this DNA evidence and where the heck did it come from if it did come, in fact, on that sticker of the tag there.
That's where the prosecution is going to fall short. Because if from the moment within 11 minutes that AJ Armstrong is your #1 suspect and you truly believe that he's the guy, if he had blood on him anywhere, you better believe they were going to sample it and test it.
And look who's coming up walking right now. Down the sidewalk or up the sidewalk. That is the lead prosecutor in this case. That is John Jordan. He is a veteran. He has tried a lot of big cases for the DA's office, and that's a long first day that this crew has had.
Absolutely.
They've got to be back here bright and early tomorrow morning. Do we have any idea of who the witnesses, we'll talk about today's witnesses, but what I don't have an idea about is we don't know the order of witnesses?
No, you don't know. Now, what I will say is that as a professional courtesy in trials long like this, the sides will exchange the order of the witnesses for the following day. Okay? So normally before we leave tonight, because trust and believe, both sides are working tonight. There will be no sleep for the next 3 weeks for this crew, okay? So what normally happens is that both sides will say the day before, this is my list of witnesses for tomorrow. And that's just as a courtesy. And the prosecution normally does it because when the defense puts on their case, they will want that same courtesy extended to them. And so I bet each side knows who's coming next, but we, as the gallery or the audience won't know.
Understood. I don't think I ever thought it all out. We need to talk about the alarm issue. The alarm has always been an issue in every one of these trials, and it looks like it's going to pop up again. What did we hear that you guys keyed in on from each side during opening statements regarding the alarm? Anything interesting to you guys about that?
They definitely both mentioned it and highlighted it. John Jordan definitely said that the door is locked.
Yeah. Alarm never went off.
Alarm didn't go off. The alarm had to be turned off once officers arrived to the door. And then DeToto obviously said, well, the family know it's faulty. there are issues there.
Right.
And he mentioned that
and he kept
someone
saying, I
with
think he
a
said
keypad.
77. He kept saying like a
77,
really
yeah.
high
Yes.
number.
Yes.
And John Jordan would object every time he said that.
Yeah. He said that there were 77 errors with this alarm system.
In 1 month.
In 1 month, just for that month, I believe. And then he backdoored, he being Rick, backdoored and said, well, their expert is going to tell you that he testified in an earlier proceeding that the alarm system was flawless. And that he mentioned to that other jury that something was, that it was just an impeccable alarm system, never made any mistakes. But then Rick DeToto came back and said, no, that's not true. There were 77 false readings or whatever type of mistakes the alarm system made for just 1 month. Now, John Jordan objected and said that that's not entirely true. Why that's not entirely true or how that's not entirely true, we won't know until that person testifies.
Yeah, that'll be interesting, I think. Have we hashed out, by the way, there's another issue with that person, the Alarm.com sort of the suit. It's a high-ranking official with Alarm.com, as I understand it, whether or not that person is going to be an expert witness. And if they are an expert witness, that lets them do sort of a little bit of guesswork with leeway interpreting data?
Absolutely. It allows them, number one, to opine on the evidence. A layperson or a fact witness cannot opine on evidence. You can only opine on things if you have personal first-hand knowledge, right? And you certainly cannot opine on something that's highly technical like a home alarm system unless you're an expert in the field. So to allow him to opine on that alarm system, he would have to be deemed an expert. And just to be honest, it wouldn't take much to make someone an expert. If you work in that field every day for 20 years and that's what you do, one could argue that you're in fact an expert.
And we just don't know if that person will be seen as a lay or an expert, and we believe we won't know until maybe just beforehand.
Yes, I think that they'll hash that out. They'll have a hearing based on that, but if I'm a betting woman, I would say he will be deemed an expert and allowed to opine on the evidence.
They did something else I thought was interesting before we even got started this morning, and that was invoke the rule. What does that mean?
So invoking the rule is you want to protect the integrity of witnesses' statements. You don't want them to piggyback on what someone else said, right? And so when you invoke the rule, what you're stating is that if you are a potential witness in this case, you have to leave the courtroom. You cannot hear testimony, you cannot hear opening statements. And so the rule was invoked this morning, and so both sides had to clear the courtroom and the witnesses had to leave. The problem with that for the defense was that all of AJ's family and support had to leave because they could potentially be witnesses.
They were in like a spillover room where they could monitor the proceedings, correct?
They could watch it if the court allows, but I doubt that because what is the difference? You might as well leave them in the courtroom. The whole purpose of invoking the rule is so that they don't hear others' testimony, so that their testimony will be, in fact, authentic and what they know. Now, if you notice, the grandmother was allowed to stay in the courtroom.
She did stay, right? So there are exceptions to the rule?
Well, they're not exceptions. What there is an agreement that is made between the parties that basically say, if you're the mother of the complainant in the case, normally we'll agree to let that person stay in because that person just lost a loved one. And they want to see this through for their own closure and for their own benefit to be able to heal and to move on. And most times both parties will agree to allow that person to stay in. And I'm willing to bet that's why they allowed her to stay in the courtroom.
What caught my attention immediately when I looked over to the family who's sitting in the center of the courtroom here, I saw the sister, Kira, I believe is how to pronounce her name. And I know she testified in the second trial. And so once the rule was invoked, she was no longer there. So I would assume we'll see her testifying.
Absolutely.
Did you guys take a couple looks over at AJ throughout the course of the day? And if so, what were your sort of thoughts about his appearance, his demeanor? What do you guys think?
When the prosecutors were going, most of the time he just kept his head down, from what I recall. And then every now and then, if they did have evidence that they brought up, he'd look at the evidence on a monitor above or directly across from him. He'd look at the monitor. But yeah, he seemed nothing that raised anything to my end. I just look over and he's either paying attention or just looking down.
And they did share some graphic photos in the courtroom today, I believe.
Yeah.
When they went into the bedroom, they took some crime scene photos. I noticed that they didn't put those on the overhead. Is that out of respect to the family?
Absolutely, it's out of respect to the family. There will be a time where that's going to happen, but they probably just said, we'll wait until it's necessary. And right now, it may not be necessary. It may be necessary with the crime scene investigator or perhaps with the medical examiner. You know, there will be times where we would have to look at these photos and they will have to be published to the jury. But you asked about AJ's demeanor. What resonates with me, if you remember when he was arraigned, you know, a defendant has to be arraigned in the presence of the jury. And so when I say that, meaning they have to read the charge against him, formally read the charge, and then the defendant has to state whether or not he's guilty or not guilty, if he's going to plead guilty or not guilty. And that's always the drama moment.
Yeah.
Because you want to see, how does the defendant respond to that question? Is he lackadaisical about it, or is he strong and firm with what his position is? And I would
the latter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I thought he was strong and firm. And I always tell my clients, when you say not guilty, don't look at the judge, look at the jury. You talk to them and you let them know, I am not guilty. And I think he pretty much did that today.
And is this not the first time the jurors are actually hearing what he's accused of fully? During voir dire, they're hearing bits and pieces, but this is like the first time.
Well, not necessarily. Sometimes the judge will read the indictment, you know, so that the jurors can adequately assess if they can be fair and impartial given, you know, what they know about the case. But this is the first time and maybe the only time they'll hear AJ speak.
So we talk about, I know we just have a minute or two left, but his brother.
Yeah.
What about him? What kind of role is the brother going to play in this trial? Because he was mentioned, I think, by both sides.
Yes, several times.
And Rick DeToto really wants to make him a suspect. So where does that go from here?
Yeah, I think that it's going to be developed a lot by the defense. If you remember, John Jordan talked about whether or not Josh had any mental issues prior to, you know, the passing of his parents and when they were killed. And what John Jordan said was that he really didn't have any issues before then. It might have been inside of him, but it was not diagnosed. But then Rick DeToto came back and went in hard and said, no, wait a minute.
Yeah.
The family says this guy's always been suffering from some kind of mental disease. And then Rick DeToto went even further and started describing what was found in some of those medical records.
Yes,
remember?
he did.
In fact, he got objected to, but he said, we're the ones who gave the state the medical records of Josh Armstrong. We're the ones who had to tell the state this guy has had suicidal ideations, homicidal ideations, and he's schizophrenic. He has hallucinations. And then I think they went on further. Rick said that he just recently tried to set his grandparents' home on fire. 2 weeks ago.
So that sounds like a plausible alternate suspect.
Sounds like it to me. And then for the state's investigation to include only 4 minutes of testimony, and did not look into his vehicle, did not look at the surveillance, did not talk to neighbors.
Some holes there.
Yeah.
Some holes in the investigation.
Quickly here, when they talked about Josh, there's one juror that during the voir dire process, she would teach about mental health to young people in school. So I looked at her and her reactions, because she said specifically during her voir dire process that people of color, when they have mental health issues, they push it away.
Yes.
They don't address it.
That's right.
And so when this was coming up with AJ or Josh, the family said he's always had something, but they never knew until after the family's passing. All that time I'm looking at this juror, seeing her reaction, and she was very focused in on it. So whenever they bring up Josh, I'll tell you who it is later so you can be aware. Yep. But I just look at her and see her reactions to everything.
Interesting. I also tried to catch a couple of jurors, and I could see a little bit I saw during the first police officers. Some of them weren't as engaged as, say, in the opening, but maybe that's just, I thought it was a little bit of a lull then, too, because we've heard that guy essentially before, haven't we?
Yeah.
Maybe they haven't, though. They haven't, but
they haven't. But I tell you what, I was paying a whole lot of attention to those grandmothers.
Yeah, right.
The ones, I mean, some of them clearly you just know they're just a sweet grandmother on there, and just
and
kind
we
of
would think
watching
in the
them.
corner of the defense.
Yeah, absolutely. One of them I could clearly think, you know, she was really listening intently to what Rick had to say, but and had almost a smile on her face.
Yeah,
so it's going to be interesting, to see which one.
The two styles of each of the prosecutor and the defense attorney, different styles, both interesting guys, and certainly both professionals and good at their jobs. All right, we're going to wrap it up for now. We're going to have another bench. We're never going to stop doing the bench. We're going to do one tomorrow, I think, at 8 a.m., right? And court starts at 8:30 a.m.,
That's
so we're going to have to move quickly. But there is a lot going on in this trial, and it didn't disappoint today. It was thoroughly interesting, keeping in mind that 2 people died during this incident in 2016. We always remember and respect that. But the trial itself and what's going on here, I think over the next 2 weeks is going to be highly interesting. And we'll be right back in this same spot tomorrow at 8 a.m. on KPRC 2 Plus for the bench. Join us then.